The dominant view, even today, even surrounded by all this incredible technology, is that the pie is fixed.
Knowledge is what creates resources. Before we invented coal, that thing was just a rock, right? I think every utopia is a dystopia. An ultimate anything, however good, is sort of pessimistic, because then you're not imagining that things could be even better.
We don't have problems. Again, we're dead.
The government controls what things are taught in school and what the child should learn. Why aren't we recognizing that there's so much untapped intelligence already in the form of children? And like, if you want to create a general intelligence, you can just create a child.
Well, hello, everyone. It's Jim O'Shaughnessy with yet another Infinite Loops. Today's guest, I think very, very highly of. My guest today is Arjun Khemani, who is, you're still 17 years old?
Yeah.
Okay, I love this. He dropped out of school to help lead support on Naval's Airchat. He has his own podcast. He has his own Substack. He has had such notable guests as You're Making Me Green with Envy here, David Deutsch, whom I would really, really love to have on as a guest. You're particularly interested, your interests are broad-ranging, which I love to see. Epistemology, economic history, science. You love to read people like Deutsch, Popper, von Mises, who was a favorite of mine when I was your age. One that's on here that I'm going to ask you a little bit about is Ayn Rand. That's an interesting one. That's a real blast from the past for me. Welcome.
Jim, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I still remember the first episode of your podcast that I listened to. I think it was with Tim Urban. And if you would have told me that I'm going to be one of the guests on that incredible list of yours, I thought you'd be crazy back then. But, here we are.
Here we are indeed. Let's jump right in. I love the way you look at the world. We are very simpatico. For the bingo players out there, I've already said simpatico, and we're in the first couple of minutes, so I might even have to say we're vibing and things like that. But we really, we really do vibe. And I think one of the things that we vibe around is this idea that, for people who hate modernity, right? They really should read some history books. Would you agree? I mean, like Hobbes said that life was nasty, brutish, and short. And you have said that, poverty is humanity's default. Let's jump in right there, because you also have the opinion, which I happen to share with you. I don't think I use the term egalitarian, but the dominant view, even today, even surrounded by all this incredible technology, is that the pie is fixed. It is very much of a scarcity mindset. And I think you, like me, think, no, we're just starting baking pies and we can bake many, many more pies. What do you think?
Exactly. Yes. I think the wealth is a fixed pie sort of mindset is really a very, very dangerous view to have about the world. And even the good old days that never even happened, right? People have this romanticized view about the world before industrialization, that everything, humans were closer to nature, although that's not true. We didn't explore the depths of the oceans. We didn't explore the mountain peaks. None of that stuff happened. And being able to actually appreciate nature requires technology, and it requires for you to be able to at least go past those basic survival desires and to have some support against all these predators in nature and all these, because nature really is very dangerous. People like to think of it as like this, mother nature, she's really so generous and she's providing us with everything we need. We don't need anything else. We already live in abundance, but that's just not true. And yeah, I think it's very sad because I don't think anybody who talks about like, the good old days, would really actually want to be living in those good old days where where children are dying. Like half of children like ever born died before the age of 5, and that was like, it's really, really hard for a parent to see their child die at the age of 5 or below. And life expectancy was short. Everything, literally everything that we appreciate right now was it has been created, and it wasn't like just existing at the start. And so it requires knowledge creation and wealth creation that we could get into. But yeah, I don't think the good old days ever happened.
No, I think that the very term nostalgia kind of implies a pining for something as remembered, not as it was, right? And basically, for most of human history, and your remark about nature is absolutely correct. Alfred Lord Tennyson said that nature is red in tooth and claw. And he did not mean that as a compliment. he meant that nature was fucking dangerous, and that, as Deutsch would point out, literally we had to create a habitable world. And we sometimes forget that we are tool makers, we are explainers, we are extenders of our own nature. And it was in the building of those tools, it was in the better explanations that we created a vastly better world. And so I just think it might be a kink in human OS that thinks the so-called simpler times were better. Like, there's a great book that I recommend often by Bill Bryson, America One Summer 1921, I think is the title. And when you read this book, it blows you away because, like, the president's son died from playing lawn tennis at the White House. Why? Because he got a sliver. Tennis rackets were wood back then. He got a sliver in his hand, and we didn't have any antibiotics. And so he got sepsis and died from literally a splinter.
Yeah.
And this idea that, it was so noble, and the Rousseauian, man was born in freedom, and everywhere we see him in chains. That was the romantic notion at the time, and which itself was a reaction against science. And by science, I mean real science, not scientism. I want to chat about that a bit because we really share our outlook there too. Scientism, in my opinion, and I think in yours, is a religion. It is not a upholding of the scientific method. There's a great book. If you haven't read it, I recommend it to you. It's called The New Inquisition, Irrational Rationalism and the Citadel of Science by Robert Anton Wilson. He published that in 1986. So this is something that is not new. We always tend to think that, these views are just coming around now. No, these are long-standing views. And we've kind of gone from nullius et verba, which is take no one's word for it, man, to kind of it took 6 years of Latin, but it's going to be hard to even get it here. Caecus nos fide, which means trust me, take my word for it. And that seems to be the way that the establishment of science has gone. And there's a great quote from Ryan North, the science fiction author, where he says, the philosophical foundations of science are actually those of pure punk rock anarchy. Respect no one's opinion. Don't trust authority. Find out for yourself. I know you agree, but I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot there. I think Peter Thiel talked about this. He said, nowadays when people use the word science, it's often to tell of the opposite. So climate science, political science, right? Like, it's like very ironic that like science has been used as this term to sort of defend criticism off of itself. Like, what science is really about is trying to come up with new things creatively and then criticizing them, right? But then now, like, some people are using this noble term science that society really deems something as, the word, right? And like, I like to say that the data says is the new the Bible says, right? And it's like we've made sort of like people that are using like terms that saying, we're doing science here, right? So it's like it's sort of like deemed as this other kind of knowledge, and like it's deemed as like a greater importance or the only kind of knowledge that's true. But I think that's really, really a mistake. And science is all about criticizing things and not taking anything on trust, which I think is has really something that like newer generations are really like mistaking what science is meant to be. But yeah.
So that interests me because you're an unusual 17-year-old. And I mean that in the most complimentary way I can. What do you think? Is there a way to help your fellow members of your generation get back on track? I know you're doing your best. I know you've got a podcast, you've got a Substack, you have many endeavors here. I know you thought about writing a book at one point. But like, if you were trying to get your generation, and I don't want to label just one generation because a lot of generations hold these views, but specifically, younger people like yourself, how would you do that?
Yeah, it's it's a question of our times, really, Jim. But I'd also be careful about blaming this younger generation because, like, historically,
No, let me hasten that. I'm not
Mhm.
blaming the generation.
Yeah, yeah,
All generations have really misguided notions,
yeah.
but the emergence and coming of age when the popular vernacular says science, but you and I know they really mean scientism.
Mm.
That's something new, right? I didn't face that when I was growing up.
Right. I don't know how exactly I would address that particular problem, but um, like I was saying, I think um, older generations have been targeting and blaming the younger generations historically. Like that's been happening like since forever, basically. But um, yeah, how would we spread these ideas that science is about criticizing things and not just accepting something that's out of the word for it? Because like it's very easy, right? Like I don't know, you call this like a kink in human OS, but people wanting and desiring some sort of parental authority that tells them what to do or that they can trust in. That's something that seems like it's kind of a deep desire for some people. And then, once somebody says that this is the science and this is the authority on knowledge, then it gets very easy to sort of accept that and to indulge in that. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how I would go about instead other than just like, uh, sort of doing what I'm doing. And I don't know what you're doing. It's like just talking about these ideas, spreading them, and uh, yeah, not being afraid to just be vocal about these ideas and uh, to talk about them even when it's something that the other person doesn't agree with.
Yeah, and you're dealing with a mostly bankrupt ideology. If one of the things that they persist in is trying to silence anyone whose opinions are different than their own.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you that the what you're doing, and so I'm so impressed by, is taking action. You are talking. You are a young man who is like literally putting yourself in the arena, and I really applaud you for that. And I know you share some of my ideas about our antiquated educational system. It seems to me that one of my favorite authors, Robert Anton Wilson, says that in his day, what they wanted to do was implant a correct answer machine in your brain. In other words, there was only one right answer, and actually mistakes were bad. Mistakes were
Mm.
punished. And then I also kind of bring in another favorite of mine, Jed McKenna, and he says, and I'm going to read this verbatim because I can't say it better than Jed. He says, the very idea of putting our formative years to good and happy use is so radical as to be practically unthinkable. What if young people were encouraged to explore, learn, and develop instead of being herded and homogenized? So you left that system. Again, I'm going to take another crack at how you might be able to help people in your generation who didn't leave that system. How would you, if you were setting up your own academy, right? How would you make it different than the old school way we're trying to educate younger people today?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I don't think I would want to try and set up an academy. I think everything should, with children, with people in general, it should be happening voluntarily. So children should be able to choose whether they want to come to my academy, or even to like learn from me and like have a conversation with me. So I don't think I would be trying to set up an academy. But I think like one of the problems right now is that school and education right now is compulsory. So like you're basically just forced legally to send your kids to school, and like that doesn't seem to be like this other option to, as you just pointed out about the quote, that childhood like sort of has to be about that homogeneity, and like every child has to go through the same curriculum and to learn the same subjects, and like what about all the fun and the curiosity and like all of that stuff that's being destroyed in these institutions? So it's interesting how you mentioned that, how I would go about spreading this, because like I remember when I was in school, and this was like kind of my last parents teachers meeting before I left school. My mom was called, and my class teacher would just basically tell tell my mom that Arjun has his unique views against school and authority, and that's okay, but he's instigating a lot of other students to disobey the school rules as well. I thought that was the funniest thing and a very good compliment, although obviously that was not meant to be put that way. Uh, but yeah, I still wish I was like even more vocal about my ideas, and like I sort of like, yeah, I think I could have done better. But the fact that my teacher said that was really funny. Um, and yeah, like I think even the concept of like hard work, right? Like I think it's like really, really overrated. And we could get talking about this when we talk about Ayn Rand, but like I think like I want to live a life without sacrifices and without compromises, right? Like I hear all of these successful and well-achieved people talk about how much hard work they had to put in, and like how much they had to sacrifice, but I really think like it's just way more creative and productive, and like it's just better for you to sort of follow your interests, and to like, yeah, just see where they lead you, right? Like sure, you have to make trade-offs, and like but you choose the better option, and I wouldn't call choosing a better option a sacrifice. So like all of these Olympic level athletes who are training so many hours a day and sacrifice, quote unquote, sacrificing on parties. If that's something that they really want, then I don't think I'd call it a compromise or a sacrifice. It's just, you're following what you really want to do. And I think that's really noble and courageous of you. Yeah.
So walk me through, I agree, by the way, following your curiosity is probably the best way to learn about everything. So walk me through the last thing you got super curious about and what you do. What did you study? What books did you read? Walk us through your process.
Yeah. I think the last sort of big thing was Austrian economics. Um, I think that there's a natural next step from Papirian epistemology, which I know you're interested in, and Austrian economics. So I was having a discussion about just generally economics with my friend, and he brought up Austrian economics and anarcho-capitalism and all these things that I just didn't understand back then. And I was like, I really want to dig into this more because this seems really, really interesting. So yeah, I asked my friend for a few book recommendations, surfed the web online, and just started reading and started talking to people about these ideas. Hosted a couple of people that are connected with Mises University and like a Mises Institute and Ideas of Liberty on my podcast. And yeah, I mean, that was sort of my learning journey. It was very unstructured. It wasn't like you go to college and you like study this curriculum and do all of these things. It was just like I was interested. I picked up a few books and started learning.
Let me recommend, if you haven't read it already, Hayek's book, The Road to Serfdom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a very good one on this topic. You wrote something along the lines of profits are proof of service. I like that because I think that people really fundamentally misunderstand, the function of money. In my opinion, money is an information technology. Or more prosaically, like the author I just had on the podcast, Devin Erickson, says, money is the equivalent of bucks given. And
Yeah.
he was saying, he was having an argument with somebody on Twitter, basically saying, here you are whining about the fact that your worthless degree ain't getting you any money. Let's just translate it into, that's because nobody gives a fuck about what you chose to study. And honestly, it's harsh, but it's really a simple and straightforward and therefore like a calm razor-like way of getting people to understand it. Like, so if I told you, hey, I got a job for you, I'm going to put you out in the Sahara Desert and I want you to dig holes, and it's going to be hot and it's going to be really hard work and everything else. What do you want to get paid for that? Well, I know you're not going to take that job because you're going to say, well, nobody gives a fuck for holes in the Sahara Desert. But, there's an entire economic school of thought and philosophy that the Marxist theory of value that says the value is created in the labor that it takes to create it. Well, I think that you disagree with that. I know I disagree with it. And the idea that the other part of money as an information technology is it does a pretty good job. Now, note, pretty good job. It doesn't do a perfect job. Nothing does a perfect job. But it does a very good job of allocating resources. When you look historically at all of the attempts to do top-down command-style economies, they don't have that asset allocation resource available to them. And so resources are horribly allocated, generally based on might, not right. In other words, the guys with the guns get all the resources, right? And we see this time and time and time again. How would you, if we were going to put you in a debate, how would you convince the other side that, wow, you really need to maybe even read some history here? And then, but what kind of case would you make?
Yeah. Firstly, this is why I love your podcast so much. You do such a good job at summarizing these important ideas and framing questions in such an amazing way. So I just thought I'd flag that. But yeah, this idea that profits are proof of service, right? Proof of value. It's like the reason I pay $5 for my coffee and somebody's offering me a coffee for $5 is because I value the cup of coffee more than I value my $5. But the person who's making the coffee, they value the $5 more than the cup of coffee that they're serving me. And so it's this mutual exchange that's a win-win. And we both have different valuations of the same thing, right? So it's this subjective theory of value that you're hinting at. And I think like sort of if you understand that concept, you're like, yeah, you know more than like a lot of economists who are like a formal, who have a formal degree and stuff. It's such a simple concept, but it has such amazingly huge implications for how to organize society and how things get organized in society efficiently, right? So yeah, I think like that point about the subjective theory of value is like one of the top ones I would make.
And like, what kind of metaphors would you develop? Because metaphors can be very helpful in helping your average human grok.
Mhm.
Again, like a great metaphor is Devon's money is
Yeah.
fucks given, right? I love that. Um, what other sorts of analogies or metaphors would you use to get people to understand the concept you've just articulated?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think I've ever thought about it in terms of that before, but I do think how it could be helpful. Um, yeah, nothing comes to mind right now, but is there something that you would use, especially for this concept or like the wealth is a fixed pie certain type of concept? Because
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you have these axiomatically, they're called planted axioms, right? An axiom is something that is self-evidently true, right? So you don't question an axiom. A planted axiom is where you take a highly questionable idea and plant it as if it can't be questioned. So the idea again of simply all you got to do is either watch some history videos on YouTube or read a book of history. A great book to read would be The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant. And I would make the case that a fixed pie mentality is one of scarcity, and that leads to people. I mean, again, if here's the analogy: if I tell you there's one pie, and I don't know, there's 100 people in the room, and we're all hungry, what's going to happen? The strongest, mightiest people are going to grab that pie, keep it from the other people, eat it all for themselves, and then you'll get a lot of disharmony and a lot of agitation. If, on the other hand, you have the idea that, no, look, there's a stove right over here, and look, here are all the ingredients for pies. I've got a solution. There's 100 of us. Let's make 100 pies, right? And that is the idea of abundance and the idea, of course, of progress, right?
yeah,
In the past, we didn't have that stove over there. We didn't have those ingredients readily available to us. That came to us through the wonders of innovation and progress. And innovation and progress come out of the human mind. The idea, I mean, steel doesn't exist in nature. It came out of a human mind. And so I think that the idea that we can do things in a top-down allocation method really, basically, if you boil it down, it comes down to the idea that Hawkins has in his book Power versus Force. Basically, people who love to tell other people all their many failings, and that they, because they are so wise, are going to be very noblesse oblige and correct your mistaken ideas. I think you make that case about what I think you call the altruism trap. Talk a little bit about that.
yeah. But just to tie a knot on the previous thread, you were talking about the fixed pie fallacy, and like I know some people have spend so much time worrying about this non-problem of like maybe like alien intelligence would want to steal all our resources. I think that's just the most absurd idea like somebody could have. Like I think people um resources are just like limited to the amount of knowledge that people have, and knowledge is what creates resources. Like before we invented coal, like that thing was just a rock, right? We had to invent and make it into coal. And so I don't think like aliens who have the power to even visit Earth, and like they have so much wealth and knowledge that they could actually visit Earth, would come here all the way and steal our resources. They would want to trade with us and try to learn with us and try to teach us, right? But yeah, the altruism trap that you mentioned is basically that, I guess, like, so it can be easy to imagine it if like we think of happiness as like a red ball. Okay, let's say I possess that red ball of happiness, and because it's not good to be selfish, and because like because I should just be parting away with whatever thing that makes me happy, I give the ball to you. But you don't want to be selfish either, right? So you give it to your spouse. But your spouse doesn't want to be selfish, and she gives it to like this aunt that she doesn't have any feelings about or affections at all, but she still gives it because she's been told that selfishness is bad, and you need to make sacrifices. So this ball just keeps on getting passed around, and eventually, like ideally, in a world that's perfectly altruistic, nobody in the world is ever happy because nobody actually possesses the ball, and the person who actually possesses the ball is someone who's selfish, right? According to the way these terms are put. So yeah, I think like that's like the altruism trap is sort of connected to the fixed pie fallacy. It's that it's sort of assuming that you can't create more red balls, that you can't create happiness, and that you can't, like, if you try to pursue what you want to do, that's at the expense of somebody else trying to pursue what they want to do. And just like logically, I don't think it's more efficient for everybody to solve everybody else's problems, instead of focusing on their own. I think like people make more progress if they just follow their interests, focus on their local problems, and try to solve them, instead of like people worrying about what other people are going through. Or obviously I'm not talking about like not having empathy or not caring about your friends. That is something that you might want to do, but since you want to do it, I won't consider that altruistic. I would just consider that you following your values. And I think like me following Ayn Rand, I view the word selfish in a very virtuous sense. So I would definitely call it rationally selfish, rationally self-interested.
So, like Adam Smith's famous line, it is not from the benevolence of the baker that we expect our bread, but rather his self-interest. And if everybody is acting in a self-interested way, it actually creates a system whereby goods and services multiply exponentially, and there's just more of everything. I think that one of the things that, as I was listening to you, that interests me is I think we spent so long in human society after we emerged from hunter-gathering under the rule of vengeful religions. And therefore, and I'm not pointing a finger at any particular one, I think that most religions were used to explain things, hopefully, on the good side, but also used to control the population. There was a disputed finding that Will Storr told me about. It did get retracted, but the idea is an interesting one to contemplate. And that was that that whenever a society grew to over 1 million people, vengeful gods appeared. And again, if I'm running a 1 million person society, well, you know what? I might want to try to keep them in line with vengeful gods, with 10 commandments, with all sorts of things. And I'm not saying, by the way, that those 10 commandments are each and every one of them horrible. Not at all. But if we understand that a lot of the words that we use today still have those clinging tendrils to the origins of those words, because selfish in the classic sense of the way the word is often interpreted is not a great thing. Selfish is like this is mine. I don't care about you at all. And I only am in this for myself. And that isn't what you mean. At least I don't think so. That isn't what
Yeah.
you mean when you're using the term selfish. You mean, I think, that the best way to make the world a better place is to improve yourself first, right?
Yes, and it's like selfishness, or at least like the way I would think of the word selfishness is not callousness, right? It's not about like not caring about people, and I don't think like altruism is about generosity either. So I think like people can um, people can work on problems that they're interested in and focus on helping themselves, and at the same time create this better world, create a better society by just the indirect ramifications of their actions. So yeah.
What do you think is motivating people who, is it a desire to control? Um, because you make the point that, like with compulsory school, that's coercion, right? You're coercing the children to have to go to school. And, that's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Matilda, but there's a great scene in it where Matilda is a lot like you. And she doesn't take shit off anyone. And the teacher Matilda asks, why should I do that? And the teacher's response is, because I'm big and you're little, because I'm an adult and you're a child, because I'm right and you're wrong. These simple assertions are really interesting in terms of they're meaningless, right? I could say, it's the logical fallacies 101, right? All men have green wings. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates has green wings. No, that doesn't work, but it lets people think that they are justified in this idea of trying to control other people. I mean, another one of my favorite bogeymen here is the World Economic Forum, where they're running these things like the year is 2030 and you own nothing and you're happy. And like, to me, I always laugh at it because they're so tone deaf under the terms of today that they don't realize that they're only creating memes and gifs for people like me to demonstrate how fucking idiotic and tone deaf they are. And yet this seems to be a constant part of us even today, this will to take this will to control others. And you see it every day where essentially, again, back to our friends at the World Economic Forum, it seems to me that they are trying to inculcate learned helplessness. They're trying to take away agency from people. And on top of it all, it seems obvious to me that, well, I would do that too if I wanted to create sheep who were easy to control. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned it just when we were talking about altruism, because I think like the people who tell you to make sacrifices in life are the ones that are actually the most selfish people, right? They're telling you how to live your life. And I think that's more selfish than anything that we've been talking about. Um, and yeah, the only thing that I really like that's associated to the World Economic Forum is Javier Milei's recent speech at Davos. I think that was just brilliant.
That was awesome. Talking about
Yeah.
Daniel going into the lion's den.
Yeah, basically telling everyone in the crowd who is a globalist just that you're wrong. This is a better and superior system. Um, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure what we were talking about before this. Sorry if I like.
No worries. For our listeners and viewers, he's a bit jet lagged because he just got back from the U.S.
Yeah.
So we'll take that into mind. We were basically talking about like what is this urge in a not small part of the population, this desire to control other people, and why I have my ideas, but I'd like to hear yours. You'd hinted at it with saying the people who are, my mom, you had a great saying, which was, the longer and louder he spoke of his honor, the quicker we counted our spoons. In other words, that guy's a thief. And
Yeah.
the people who make these great gestures, right? Oh, I am so virtuous, and the whole virtue signaling thing. Like that's your first clue that they ain't virtuous. Like way before you were born in the 1980s, a big thing here in the United States were the televangelical preachers, and like I was absolutely transfixed because the performances were so great. Like Jimmy Swaggart was one of them, and after he got caught with coke and hookers and everything else, he goes and like this guy's performing ability just still, I can still see it in my mind's eye. He's sitting up there and he's weeping crocodile tears. I have sinned against the Lord. But then
Yeah.
when you review the disposition of all of that gang, guess what? They were all the same. They were all like basically grifters and crooks. And it seems to me that younger people like yourself can help your contemporaries and help olds like me understand that even better. The other thing, as I was getting ready to chat with you, I was thinking, you must have really cool parents.
Okay. Yeah. We could get to that. But first, like, you're talking about like you being old. I just don't think that's the case. Like when I'm talking to you, it just feels like I'm talking to a child. Like and I mean that in a very very nice way. And you're just so curious and like you're coding so many things. So you're definitely like you just read all the time, I assume. But yeah. Uh, but I guess like it's an interesting like rhetorical tactic that some people use um, in a way to sort of moralize their stance and just like shun out all criticism. And like it's that I am like they're trying to claim the moral high ground and speak from a position of moral superiority and say that I am good, and therefore if you disagree with any policy or any action that I talk about, then you're a bad person. And it's like we were talking about scientism before, like even with climate science, like then it's like if you disagree with this zero emissions policy, then you're denying science, right? Although it's sort of this argument that they think that's very coherent, but it's just not. It's just like a moralizing their stance, sort of. And like the moment you label something that is sort of undeniably right in many people's minds, like Black Lives Matter is a good example. The moment you name an organization or a movement like that, it's like if you disagree with like maybe like then Black Lives Matter, the organization, has like this policy or like this action that they want to implement. And so if you disagree with this X policy, then that means you disagree with Black Lives Matter. That means you're a bad person because you think Black lives don't matter, right? So I think that's like an interesting like moralizing technique that I've seen used often, and I'm curious what you think about it, and if you've seen it a lot as well.
Well, yeah, obviously, I think that no matter where you stand on issues, like so, for example, the climate change, I think it's a legitimate problem,
Yeah.
and I think that one of the ways that I can distinguish between somebody who's a poseur and they're doing it for political or ideological reasons is I ask them a simple question. Well, so then you must be in favor of elemental nuclear energy, right? And the number of people whose expression gets very, very dour after I
Right.
ask them that kind of signifies to me, oh, okay, you're actually not interested in solving climate change. You have you have a degrowth agenda, and you must really admire Malthus.
Yeah, there's
And
this.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
there's this meme, right? Like, you are the carbon they want to reduce. I think like
Right.
it's often like implicit in many of their arguments, but sometimes it's even explicit. Like, some people will literally tell you that um, a world without humans would be a better world. And I find that so ironic. And like, as a joke, but as a serious joke, I often say that, okay, then why don't you contribute to that cause? Um, people then like get really offended by that joke, but I think that's a serious joke to make. Why don't you contribute to that cause by sort of, by doing what, right? So, yeah.
I think that for a large segment of society, um, the preference is basically they're happy with the shrink wrapped human OS as installed that they got. They're happy to, most of your beliefs are assigned either educationally, because remember, your indoctrinators are thoroughly indoctrinated themselves. That's why they're so good at it. And the way to break out is relatively simple. It's just to say, wow, that sounds like a lot of bullshit to me, and engage. Again, on all of these so-called controversial matters, I think they became controversial because the other side wanted compliance. They did not want discussion or
Yeah.
conversation. Again, back to climate change. I think it's real. I I think that the empirical evidence for it is pretty solid. I'm not going to say unquestionable, because nothing's unquestionable, but it's very solid. But that means that we need to do what we do well. We need to invent better innovations, better ways of dealing with it. It's like, if there's a comet hurling at the Earth, gosh, do I want missile based wherever to be able to take that comet out? And, from my perspective, if you really are serious about the sort of big existential risks and you yourself can do something about it, then you should. So if you look at a lot of what our venture division does, O'Shaughnessy Ventures, you'll see that we're investing in innovations that we think will be very helpful in terms of climate, in terms of productivity, in terms of using the resources that we have to their maximum and best use ability. And I think that what you're doing, and which I applaud again, is a lot of it is just really people bullshitting. And they're bullshitting because what they really have is an agenda where they want command and control. Scratch any of these people. And I think it was Mencken, I think it was H.L. Mencken who said, sort of scratch somebody who says they want to help. And what you'll really find is somebody who wants to rule. And I have no interest in ruling. I have no interest in telling other humans what to do. And I think that the best way that you can change minds is just be an example. And Jung had a great line, which is you are not what you say you will do, you are what you do. And again, what you do requires agency, requires action, requires, walking the walk and talking the talk, but more importantly, walking the walk, right? That is the way to, I think, get people to understand, wow, I guess this is something that makes sense and I should be interested in. The idea behind, getting back to scientism here for a minute, that was a big change over my life. So I'm 63. I was born in 1960. And I grew up in the age of Kennedy saying, we're going to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard, because we need to push further. We need to explore more. We need to understand and learn more. And those kinds of things were widely embraced in the United States. And then we hit this plateau. I guess the tagline is always "What the fuck happened in 1971?" And I always joke I turned 11, but but we did kind of hit this area where people became so much more cautious and they became so much more risk averse, which I'm still trying to disambiguate and figure out why that happened. But I'm very hopeful that we are in, especially when I see young people like you, that we're back in that. No, we need to explore. We need to have better explanations. And you made a remark one time, which was the idea of ultimate anything is pessimism in disguise. I love that quote. And tell me what you mean by it.
Yeah, so it's this idea that, we can go on making progress indefinitely and that we can go on having fun indefinitely, right? This progress and this fun need not stop. But like even like a lot of like people that I admire, like Richard Feynman sort of made this mistake with science when he sort of said that I don't think that there's going to be a new discovery that's going to be groundbreaking in science. And like, okay, I'm not quoting him exactly well, but he was like he was implying a sort of end to science and to scientific discovery, and I just don't think that's the case. I think like problems are always going to arise, and the thing about people is that we can go ahead and solve those problems as they arise and to create the necessary knowledge to do those things. um so so yeah, like the idea of like an ultimate anything, like even like a utopia. I think every utopia is a dystopia, right? Like every like an ultimate anything, however good, is sort of pessimistic, because then it's sort of you're not imagining that things could be even better, that you could explore more, that the universe, for all we know, practically is infinite right now, and there's so much that we could explore and transform and like build out in the universe, and terraform the entire universe and make it habitable for us, because um, this earth is not it definitely is special, but it's it's not like our life support system. We humans like live in places on earth that we wouldn't be able to without knowledge creation, without technology. So um so yeah, I think like yeah, I think like that's a good way to like summarize a lot of ideas that I think are important to think about, is that the idea of an ultimate anything is inherently pessimistic.
And I think that the other thing I like about what I know of your work is that the idea that we aren't going to have problems, right? I think it might have even been David Deutsch who said, "Yeah, there is a condition where there are no problems. It's called death."
Yeah.
Right. And I extend that by saying, if an overabundance of the precautionary principle leads to stasis, and stasis is death, and
Yeah.
just like dogmatism is death of the mind, because essentially all you are doing is shouting and chanting slogans. And, that's a really clever way, and it actually works, to self-hypnotize.
Yeah.
You can hypnotize yourself into confabulating almost any belief, right? And so the idea, what I loved about the idea of the ultimate anything is pessimism. That's very clever on your part, because it's a great way to get people to understand what the point you just made, right? I think it was Edison who said, "We don't know 1/10 of 1% about nothing." And
Yeah.
and I look at that and I love that. I love that, because it's like, wow, we just get to keep learning. We get to keep creating. And I always try to keep myself humble. And one of the ways I did, at least intellectually humble, is I always look at myself kind of as, if I come up with something cool, I always call myself a co-creator, not the creator. Because after all, we live in this now internetworked world. And, maybe I got that idea from my conversation with you. Maybe you got it from your conversation with Naval, right? And there's this chain of being that when you think about yourself and your ideas that you're co-creating, that puts all that ego away, and it stops the mind mentality, right?
Mhm.
And I think that we're getting into a place now where, you know, we're going to have new and better problems. And the idea that we don't have problems, again, they're missing the point, in my opinion. If we don't
Yeah.
have problems, again, we're dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And life is movement, right?
Yeah. And better problems. That's the crucial part, right? Like,
Yes.
we we solved starvation and now we have a problem of obesity. But I'd argue that it's definitely a better problem to have, and something that, now you can, like, there's promising medicines that are coming up that, yeah, that could probably solve obesity. But like, even the fact that, now you have more choice with food, um and all of those things. So I think, like, problems are always going to arise. We're going to solve them, and better problems are uh going to come up, and that's a good thing. Yeah, one thing that, after uh reading Deutsch, is that I just view problems in a very good light now. It's not something that, sure, it's something that you want to solve, but it's not something that, you want to get rid of once and for all. Like, I think, like, problems are inevitable, but not any single problem is inevitable, right? Like, every single problem can be solved, and yeah, we can just, like, go on doing that indefinitely. And as I said, just keep on having fun indefinitely. I think I remember asking you on my past podcast, do you want to live forever if you could? Um, and and yeah, you said, like, definitely for for 100 more years, or 1,000 more years, but you were a little averse to the idea of forever. And I think that like, that's a disagreement that we have. But yeah, I
I think
remember.
that's funny because I was going to turn that question around on you and ask you whether you wanted to live forever.
Oh, I did.
But yeah, but here's why I hedge on that. Again, it has to do with my ignorance. Who am I to say that this is the only dimension worth hanging out in? And who am I to say that I understand at all? I mean, physically, I have a high degree of probability in believing that when I die, I'm dead and the whole gym universe dies with me.
Mm,
And, then I'm food for worms. But what if I'm wrong? I mean, what if there are other dimensions? Energy can't be destroyed; it can only be transformed, right?
yeah.
And so maybe there's, and the reason I hedge there is because I'm willing to say that, like, if we discover these other dimensions, right, and we discover that they can be gotten to, I don't know whether death is one of the ways that we transform that energy or not. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. So I definitely hedge on that thing. Now, if we came up with better explanations and somebody said, no, Jim, actually, when you die, you were right the first time, dude. You become worm food and you're gone. Your consciousness is gone. Well, again, right? Like, uh, when you're dead, you don't have any problems anymore. And so, like, I want to remain open until a better explanation comes around.
Mm,
That sort of more definitively says yes or no, yay or nay on how many dimensions there are, how many are inhabitable, in what form may we inhabit them. And therefore I don't want to close myself off, and just because saying I want to live forever has a lot of implications. It implies that I believe that this is the only plane of existence. It implies that I believe that if I leave this plane of existence, I'm cooked and
yeah.
worm food. And since I don't know that, and I can't assert that with any high degree of probability, I'm waiting for those better explanations. But I'm not getting any younger. So if you come up with one, please share it with me.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I think I know a few transhumanists who've, like, who sort of push back against, like, talking about the idea of forever. Um, just, like, just that term, as you said, it definitely has a lot of implications, and it doesn't have to be forever. It can be indefinitely, and you can choose to end your life any moment. Like if you think that, like you're like bored and you're not having fun, and you think like you've discovered a lot of things, and maybe you can take your life like after a million years or something. But yeah, talking about good explanations, right? Like this sort of goes back to school, Matilda, and you were asking about my parents. Like I I never heard a good explanation um to like do what I was doing when I was in school. Like it was like always like, because I said so, or because everybody's doing it, so you have to complete school. So like people often ask me like how did I get like so much confidence to like take this alternative path and to sort of go against so many authorities, quote unquote. It's like they just never gave me a good answer. It's all just bullshit, right? And I thought like there's a different way to live life and a different way to make money. And like I was actually seeing those results in real life, and I was like, I don't need this. Like they're not giving me a good answer. And so yeah, I guess like I was just like a little bit like focused on trying to get through the truth of things, and like just trying to have fun, like I didn't want to do things just because everybody was doing them, and because I just never heard a good explanation, and I had a better way of doing things. That's why I went ahead and I did those things.
This is kind of a multi-part question. When you made the decision to leave school, first off, how did your parents take it? Secondly, were you nervous when you made that decision? And then the final part of the question would be, what surprised you the most since you did that, either positively or negatively?
Yeah. So, well, my parents didn't take it well, and it wasn't like this one conversation or one event that happened, right? It was constantly like day after day, me telling them that I hate school and I don't want to go there, and I have this different way and I want to pursue this. And yeah, we definitely had a lot of heated discussions and arguments over those days. Like I think I was like, yeah, I had wanted to drop out for like a while, until I actually did. So maybe like for 6 months, I was like just constantly telling them that I want to finish, I want to drop out and like do this other thing. So, um, but yeah, eventually, I guess like some of my real world results and sort of proving to them that there is this different way, and obviously having a paycheck help them see that have some confidence in me. Um, but then you ask about if I was nervous. I was not nervous at all. Actually, I was the happiest man alive when I dropped out. And yeah, I was ready. I was ready for the increased freedom, for the increased creativity, not being told what to do. And it's interesting, like even when I was in school, right? Like I didn't really feel that trapped, although I did feel like physically trapped because I had to be there and like I would sneak out sometimes. But I didn't feel that trapped because I knew that I I disagreed with these people, and I had ideas that were different from them, and like I was like constantly thinking about those ideas, even though like I wouldn't care whatever people would tell me to do. Like you have this project that you have to finish on this deadline, and if you don't do it, then you'll get a bad grade. I'm like, okay, I don't care. So I was kind of like free in that moment in school, but then obviously like when I dropped out, it was like just much better. Like I don't have to go to this place every day and sit in this classroom and listen to um, answers that I haven't even asked questions about.
And
Sorry,
then,
what was the
and then,
third part?
yeah, the
Yeah.
third part was what has surprised you either positively or negatively about your time since quitting school?
Well, it's definitely all been positive. I get to spend more time um on what I want to, and on my own interests, and uh just sort of talking to people that yeah, the conversation that we're having now. It's like so fascinating. I want to do this like every day, right? And I guess like what's sort of been surprising, or maybe like what was something I was what something that I was expecting, is that dropping out of school is kind of now becoming like this cool thing. So it's interesting to see that. Sure, like we have those Mark Zuckerbergs and Steve Jobs who like drop out of these uh, pretentious universities, but now like dropping out of school is sort of being viewed as dropping out of high school is being like sort of viewed as like this cool thing that you do and like is more and more being appreciated by some people, like this rebellious kind of nature where you question things and you have creative thoughts. Like that's, I guess, much more appreciated in an era where robots are automating everything, right? Like I find it very ironic that people are trying to create AGI, and I think that's a good thing. People should definitely go ahead and try to create AGI, but like we are sort of not appreciating so much untapped intelligence in the form of children by sending them to these institutions where like they're all told to think alike and to be more like specific narrow intelligences, right? Like to be like a robot or a machine. So I find that contrast very interesting, and like yeah, why aren't we recognizing that there's so much untapped intelligence already in the form of children? And like, if you want to create a general intelligence, you can just create a child.
Yeah.
But I do think AGI
Uh,
is important. I do think AGI is great, and it's a worthy goal. Just to flag that.
yeah, the author that I had on and quoted as money being shorthand for fucks given, in his book, AGI was achieved by using a child's consciousness.
Hmm.
And I don't want to give away too much, but I thought that was a really cool thing. And look, just for everyone listening, I think it's cool what he's doing. I'm not recommending that you drop out of school. If you want to be a doctor or you want to be something where you really do need to have that training, go for it. Go for it. I think that sometimes again we get caught up on definitions. Like, so we have the fellowships, and we went out of our way not to require that anyone quit a job or drop out of school or anything, because we felt, what who are we to say whether that's good or bad for them? So we
Yeah.
tried to make our fellowship as strings free as possible. And so we're really talking more about here, I think, the ossified nature of the current educational system. And Bucky Fuller had a great quote, which is, if you've come to kind of the end of the line of a old system, it probably is not a great idea to try to reform that system. And he says, just invent another one that works a lot better.
Yeah.
And so one of the ideas that you have in that regard is the idea of voluntary schooling. And I just wonder about that, just practically speaking. Is such a system tenable? If so, like, how would it work?
Yeah. Firstly, it's interesting that like you've not seen something like that happen with the advent of the internet and like so much information and knowledge being available online, right? Like Naval has this quote that like there is no um scarcity what's scarce is the desire to learn, not knowledge, right? Like there's so much information that's already available. So it's interesting that we haven't sort of revolutionized education yet with these increasing technologies. But I would like I don't know if you've read Ivan Illich's Deschooling Society. Um,
No, I haven't read that one.
yeah, so he proposes like this idea of networks where you connect students and teachers, quote unquote, that the teacher that wants to teach a particular subject and the student who actually wants to learn a particular subject, and like you connect them and like you sort of like just are able to allocate resources um, to students and to teachers to just sort of follow their interests and to learn what they want to learn. And I think like what would be even important is that like private companies and competing to give their service of privatized education to these children, because like I think like there's big lack of competition, and it's kind of a monopoly right now, where like the government controls what things are taught in school and what the child should learn. So when there's like just more of that, and you have schools that are very, very wide ranging, and then families, and then hopefully the child themselves has an option to choose what they want to learn and which school, if those even exist, they want to go to. Like they can just like be part of these networks where they're connected to like the thing they want to learn, and they have the tools and the resources necessary to get that. Obviously, it's difficult right now because like as we're talking about like this, right? Like a lot of people in like societies, like in certain societies, women are banned to, or girls are banned to like go to school and to study, right? And like they're fighting to actually get that education. And we're talking about like all these like very, very different things from a normal education. Um, but yeah, I think like it will be like a slow adopted thing where like I don't know if you've read like the uh sort of the model Elon proposed for Tesla, which is like starting with the Roadster, which was like a very elite car, and like just meant for rich people, and like they would adopt those first, and they would get the funding from selling those cars, and then they would produce cars for the mass market. So I think like I would expect something like that happening for education, and for privatized education in particular. Um, yeah, that's kind of my general thoughts on that.
That's the mimetic nature of humans is what Elon is trying to take advantage of there. In other words, do the roadster for the rich folks. That becomes aspirational for other people, rinse it or repeat.
Yeah, I think it was like the Roadster would give them funds to create these other cars that were specifically aimed for, um, for people who could afford them, like cheaper cars. So it was just like infeasible for them at that point to create a mass market car. So I don't know if I would exactly put it in those terms as like mimetic desires, but it was definitely like something that uh, Elon had in mind strategically to sort of be able to produce for the larger world, even if like it wasn't the same car, right? Like it was like different cars um, for
Yeah,
that were more affordable. Yeah.
and of course that's how books got funded as well.
Hmm.
The original books were really super expensive, and many of them were actually encrusted with jewels. They were thought to be so rare, and obviously only rich folk could afford them. But then that allowed the printer to get more printing presses and make it cheaper for other people. So I definitely get that. I was thinking as you're talking about like the idea of voluntary schooling, of that great English mystic William Blake, who said, "I must create my own system or be enslaved by another's." And I think that's I love William Blake, but just to kind of play devil's advocate, you also quoted Naval saying, "Hey, the resources for learning are abundant. You can find them anywhere." And the scarcity is in where are all the students? And
Mm.
so, if we accept it that he's probably right there, and that many people, even though they do have all of these resources that they can learn tremendously with, and pretty much free also to boot. Um, do you think that there is any merit to the argument that to have a well functioning society, we at least have to get those who are like not seeking out knowledge and learning into a position where they can, at a minimum, read, write, and reckon?
I don't think so, and I've thought about this a little, and I think like the problem with like people sort of um, not accessing these these technologies and this abundant information could be like a cultural problem where like you're told that this is something that you just have to do, and then I find it no surprise that a lot of people tend to dislike reading books when they grow up, because like in school you're just forced to read these boring textbooks that you're probably not interested in, and then people sort of associate reading with those bad times that they had in school, and like you don't find a lot of readers, especially like in newer generations. So yeah, I wouldn't say that people need to be coerced or or controlled to like learn basic things. That like I think like people are naturally interested in learning and they know how to learn. You often hear this phrase, right? Like, don't teach a child like what to learn, teach them how to learn. And I think I agree with that. But like, I think like people already know how to do that. It's just that we don't need to inhibit that knowledge creation in any way, and just to allow them to sort of flourish um, by following what they're interested in, and like they will naturally learn how to learn, how to like speak and to write and to do all these things, because like those problems are required for them to solve, to like maybe like uh, go about following this other interest of theirs. So like maybe if somebody hasn't done mathematics in high school or even in middle school, like, but they want to like do this computer science thing where like they uh have to have that knowledge of a certain basic algebra and like probably calculus, then like if that's something that's in their problem situation, then they will go ahead and try to learn those subjects to actually uh, do the thing that they really want, which is computer science, right? So yeah.
I could argue that at least providing, if we were going to stick with a compulsory education system, that one of the first changes that I would suggest is at least acquaint people with things that might spur their curiosity, right? I agree that if you're passionate about something, you'll find a way to learn about it, right? But gameplay, for example, so many people cluck their tongues at it, but I think that it's a great way to learn things. And trying to, it's a very Taoist concept, right? We, actionless activity, go with the flow. And the way of making, you make the point of making kids read boring textbooks. I agree completely. I taught myself how to reading comic strips because I thought they were great.
Yeah.
And my dad also read to me, as did my mother. So I was kind of reading from a very young age and loved it. I wonder, basically, what are you passionate about that's next? What are you going to dive into on the next leg of your journey?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty excited about what I'm working on right now at Airchat. I really love the vision, and it's a way you know, for people to have better conversations on the internet. And that's something I realized that I really crave and I want to have more of. So uh, it's definitely a project that I'm really passionate about. And, that being passionate about something really helps in the work, right? Like you can see it in the results and like how you're going about your day to day and just your mood in general. But I guess like broader things, well, I'm really interested um, in longevity and life extension. So maybe like that's something that I work on next, or even like just sort of think about a lot more next. Or I could probably even do that right now. I'm actually gonna have someone on my podcast uh, in a few days who did full state in gene therapy, and I would call it like it's something like really kind of, I mean, it's really new and revolutionary, so I'd call it bold. But there is a lot of empirical data that suggests that it's safe and like it's actually beneficial. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. But yeah, I guess like generally in the longevity space, I'm really interested in, because like as I told you, my desire already is to live at least indefinitely, and just to do these amazing things and to yeah to keep having fun indefinitely.
That's a great answer. Well, we're gonna include the links to your Substack and your podcast and everything else with the show notes. Any other place you'd like to point listeners and viewers if they want to learn more about you and what you're up to?
Pretty active on Twitter, so my Twitter handle is just my full name.
Perfect. Same with me. Mine are my initials, JP O'Shaughnessy. Yeah. All right. Well, if you've listened to the podcast, you know what's coming next. And that is, we're going to wave this wand and we're going to make you emperor of the world. You can't kill anyone. You can't put anyone in a re-education camp. I'll add to your prescriptions. You can't coerce anyone. But what you can do is you can incept them. And we're going to give you a magical microphone and you're going to speak into it. You're going to say two things. And the next day, whenever the next day is for all 8 billion plus people on the planet, everyone's going to wake up and they're going to say, oh my God, I've just had two of the greatest ideas. And unlike all those times in the past, I'm actually going to act on each one of these. What two things are you going to incept in the world's population?
Well, that's quite something. I don't know. You've asked like every guest of yours this question, but as you know, like, you know, humans are fallible, and I could definitely be wrong about things, but this won't be news to you. But the two things I would say is, quoting Deutsch entirely, is problems are soluble, problems are inevitable. And
Love it.
I think like just that, those two things have so wide ramifications. You know, they sound pretty simple, right? Like, and I feel that's the case with a lot of Deutsche stuff. It just sounds so simple that it can often just go over your head, really. But like once you go into like a second reading or the third reading, like you sort of really try to understand those concepts and like what knowledge really means, what wealth means, you know, what like the set of physical transformation that you can cause, and like even viewing problems in a better light than you would perhaps before. So, but yeah, those are the two things I would incept.
I love them. I love them. Well, Arjun, love to see what you're doing. Love to see a young person taking this kind of bull by the horns and going out and living your life so successfully. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I look forward to yours as well, so we can have a mutual admiration society.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim.